This part is an additional video. Those who are interested can actually learn about how we can understand and study about carbon recycling. So the first one is people can use core samplers. So here the scientists collect sediment cores for analysis of organic carbon content and composition. We can also use gas chromatographs. So here we analyze soil and water samples for greenhouse gas concentrations including methane and carbon dioxide. DNA sequencing can be used. So here a sequence of microbial DNA to identify and quantify microbial communities involved in the organic carbon decomposition. Then numerical modeling softwares are there, so which can be used to develop and running ecosystem models, biogeochemical models and climate models. So these are all the three things we have studied earlier. So all these things can be modeled. So these are all the tools by which somebody can wants to study about how the organic carbon or carbon recycling occurs in the Arctic region. So how do we do the soil and sediment sampling? Basically, we collect the sample for analysis of organic carbon content. We study or carry out the isotopic composition and microbial communities using cores and grabs. We will be looking at the isotopic tracer methods in elaboration. The next one is the laboratory incubation. So here we can conduct experiments to study decomposition rates, microbial activity and greenhouse gas emissions under controlled conditions. The third one is the isotope tracer techniques. Here using stable isotopes to track the fate and the turnover of organic carbons in the Arctic ecosystems. Then numerical modeling like earlier one, we can study that. So what is isotope tracer techniques? So stable isotope variations are used as an effective tracing of climate induced changes in hydrological cycles, powerful climate indicators, temperature indicators. So these are basically the environmental radioisotopes are used as the time indicators. So by that, using isotopes, we can actually measure that and we will be looking at how it can be actually done. So in the marine and the polar environment, this is very ideal for isotopic investigation because it is very homogeneous in nature. And here we can study even the slightest variations, and the climatic variations are more dramatic because these areas are pristine areas which are not affected by the human population. So that's the reason it's a very important area for many of the scientists to understand how the carbon cycling is actually happening, because what is happening in the global scale is also applicable in the Arctic region. The carbonate shells of marine foraminifera, that is a function of O18 to O16 ratio of seawater and its temperature. So this is how we can actually measure the isotopic tracer methods can be used to find out the carbon cycling. The O18 to O16 ratio and H2 to H1 ratio of the precipitations are strongly correlated with temperature of formation of ice caps. So from there we can actually study how the carbon can be stored or was deposited here. All those things we can study. Tritium and the carbon-14 variations can be used to trace different water masses. So this is another important thing we can actually study, and we can also establish their circulation pattern at depth and investigate the mixing between the shallow and deep ocean. So here what are required is H3 and C14 quantity variation, because these are tracer isotopes. So there is a small amount of change in these kind of isotopes. Based on that we can say what was the origin, how they moved from one place to another place. All those things we can study. Air bubbles trapped in ice coupled with isotopic composition of ice can be used for the reconstruction of the history of CO2 and methane concentration in air. Here various isotopes are given. One is a stable isotope deuterium, oxygen 18 and carbon 13. These are used for studying what type of materials. One is marine sediments can be studied, lacustrine sediments, ice cores, cave deposits, groundwater and precipitation. So all these things can be studied using these tracer isotopes. And type of climatic information what we can understand is basically temperature of the ocean we can study, ocean circulation, volume of ice sheets, air temperature, relative humidity, dynamics of water cycle on regional and global scale. So all these things can be studied by using deuterium, oxygen 18 and carbon 13 isotopes. We also have anthropogenic radioisotopes which are tritium or hydrogen 3, krypton 85, cesium 137, carbon 14. So this can be used to study about ocean water, oceanic carbonates, lacustrine sediments, groundwater precipitation and atmosphere. Here we can study about the dynamics of ocean, dynamics of the atmosphere and the sedimentation rates. And there are other natural isotopes which are carbon 14, radon 222, lead 210, argon 39, potassium 40, thorium 230, protactinium 231, uranium 234, uranium 238. So these are all the natural isotopes. This can also be used to study the marine sediments, lacustrine sediments, cave deposits, ocean water, groundwater and atmosphere. Here dating of deep sea sediments can be carried out using carbon 14 studies. Dating of lacustrine sediments, dating of cave deposits, ocean waters, groundwater and the dynamics of atmosphere all can be studied using these isotopes. We will understand how all these things are actually possible. That is basically using Seuss effect. So the Dr. Seuss is a very important novel many students would have studied. So this is a different Seuss effect. So change in the ratio of atmospheric concentration of heavy isotopes of carbon, that is C12 is a normal carbon and C13 and C14 are called as heavy isotopes of carbon, by the admixture of large amount of fossil fuel derived carbon dioxide. So how we are actually doing the comparison is fossil fuel derived carbon dioxide has no carbon 14 CO2. And this also having less amount of carbon 13 CO2 relative to carbon dioxide in the atmosphere or the natural or the biogenic one, and carbon in the upper ocean and terrestrial biosphere. So from this difference we can actually see what is the different atmospheric concentration of heavy isotopes. So from this, what we can, by using the heavy isotopes of carbon, which is we are basically comparing the anthropogenically produced carbon dioxide and the naturally occurring carbon dioxide. So from this ratio, we can actually study how the entire carbon cycle is actually happening.